Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Doing great. How about you, Eric?
It's fantastic. Spring is in the air and it's actually warming up. It's almost turning into summer already.
Absolutely. All of a sudden, everything is blooming and blossoming, and it's actually 70 degrees out today. So neat stuff.
Yes, a beautiful day after rainy spring weather and the cold winter here in New England.
It was our second most rainy April on record.
Yes.
So
But now we get to reap the benefits of that. All that rain causes all this growth and green and color.
that's right. April flowers, April showers, and May flowers. And of course, the old corny joke, you know what Mayflowers bring?
Pilgrims.
You got it. Let's start this podcast over.
There we go. Well, today we're going to be talking about relationships. And this is something that's important to all of us, not just in business, but obviously in our personal lives as well. And let's face it, the fact of the matter is, some relationships come very easily, they're simple to maintain, others require some work. So, we're going to talk about how you build relationships, both personally and in business, and what the benefits are of maintaining them.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm sure that you got exposed to that somewhat as far as really starting to analyze it, kind of like I did, and that's when we started getting into business and started analyzing what networking is all about and figuring out that it's not about sales, but it is about relationships, because people will get so shy when they're starting out doing that thing. But the beauty of it is once you discover the relationships are cool in networking, you discover that they're really what drives the whole world. And I'm sure that you've made a whole lot of great friends through networking, and so have I. And it just it makes me appreciate things a whole lot more, especially because of the tips that we actually teach on how to develop relationships.
Certainly. I mean, when I started networking, I was exposed to a whole group of people that not only had I never met before, but if I hadn't gotten into networking, I probably would never have met. And it was terrifying at first, but when you realize that it's about building those relationships, and the networking event itself is just the tip of the iceberg, you really get to know people. And as you build those relationships, friendships evolve and business relationships evolve. And you never know where a relationship is going to go. It could go in both directions.
Yeah, they do. And but obviously the good ones, they just pay off over and over again as far as friendships go, as far as resources go, referrals. I mean, you don't know where they're going to go, but with the 6 degrees of separation, it's amazing the things that can happen through that. And again, I mean, we started mostly with business, but I've developed so many close friendships with people just through that, including with you. And
Right.
it's that's really the big benefit of that. Obviously, it's nice to use it for business development and that kind of thing. But there are so many different things that you can do with that. Obviously, for consumerism, it's great to talk to people that you know and trust about if you're going to be buying something, that kind of thing. It's always great to get opinions from somebody like that. And in the workplace, it's really, really important to have relationships with your vendors. Very, very important if you are a boss, it's with your employees. So there's all different types of things that we got to cover. But on the personal side of things, you know how I try and take a look at this from a bunch of different angles, and it says personal relationships. Some of the 5 benefits here that they listed, number one is living longer. The bottom line is if you're lonely, you're not
Yep.
going to live as long as you are if you have companionship.
There
Uh,
have been many studies about that. And in fact, the CDC recently listed loneliness as the number one killer in America. It has that big an effect on your health.
No, I'm sure that it absolutely is true. I mean, the first time that I was really exposed to that was when I was probably about 20 years old. And I thought my dad's parents were going to live forever. My grandmother passed away at age 85, and I thought his dad would go on and on and on because he was, a really hard businessman and that kind of stuff. And what he was gone within 2 years, and it had to be because of loneliness,
Yeah,
not there with anybody.
that's very common, especially in older couples. When one passes away, the second, if they don't have other relationships outside, friendships to keep them going, other family relationships, they do tend to pass away in close proximity.
Yep. And one of the reasons, which is point number two here, is what personal relationships do is if you have good relationships, it helps you to deal better with stress because you have somebody to talk to and that. So, uh, and number three is you're healthier. So those three are all related.
Absolutely. And I mean, just think about all of those things put together. Having those relationships are literally extending your health and life. I mean, that's the basis of everything. Being healthier, living longer, anything else you want to do, making money, traveling, whatever else you want to do to be successful in, being able to be alive to do it and be healthy enough to do it are the basic building blocks.
Absolutely. And there's a whole lot of articles written about as far as what are the keys to developing good relationships. And, a couple of points. Obviously, it's really, really important to be a listener, number one, because if you're not a listener, people aren't really going to be interested in talking to you. The old mantra goes, you're born with two ears and one mouth, use them proportionately. And it's absolutely true. And with listening goes better communications, which is really, really important. And what this says is communicate openly, but without judgment. That's one of the things that we all fall back on. But the more that we can just take people for what they are and look for the good things in people, the better off you're going to be. And this is especially true in the workplace. I mean, you have a lot of um, bosses out there who have a bad reputation because all they're doing is pointing out what's wrong without talking about what's going on that's right with the people that are working for them. So, working on this in the workplace is really, really important.
Oh, certainly. Workplace relationships, I mean, we tend to take personal relationships for granted. Workplace relationships really do require work because you're not with these people because you chose to be. You're sort of thrown together. So you have a wider range of personality traits, different backgrounds, different upbringings. So you really do have to make the effort to connect, above the differences and focusing on what everybody has in common. And it does require more work because, again, your relationship is actually affected by the workplace, whether it's because you're working very closely together, if there's high turnover, you know, do you keep in touch? What happens? Workplace relationships, by definition, tend to be transitory. But when you can really connect with someone on a personal level, that workplace relationship goes far beyond that.
Absolutely. And the bottom line is you spend a whole lot more time with the people that you're working with than you spend at home, too. So,
Yes.
um, a few pointers as far as that goes, and it's a lot really the same as it is when we're talking about relationships and networking and everything else. But number one is trust. If you trust your boss and you can trust your employees, that is really so important. And obviously, with trust comes mutual respect. And that's really, really important. We've talked often about the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And if the employees that you're working with that you may have to correct from time to time know that you respect them up front, as opposed to just looking over them and correcting them when they're wrong, it is so, so important. Number
Yeah,
three,
trust is something that really has to be, be worked towards, you have to understand how the other person thinks of trust, because in terms of trust, there are really three different types of people. There are people that immediately trust you until you do something to show them you shouldn't be trusted. There are people who are cautious about trust, sort of trust but verify. And then there are people who you have to prove you can be trusted before they will trust you. And knowing what kind of person you're dealing with makes it easier for you to relate to them, because you can understand, oh, okay, they're a little closed off, I have to prove I can be trusted before we really get close. Or, there's an immediate connection, they trust you immediately, and you need to not screw that up. So knowing who you're connecting with and how they view trust is very important to building a lasting relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more that you can work on yourself first, as far as developing your own positive mindset and your own principles and that kind of thing, just your own personal being, the way that you treat anybody, regardless of whether it's in the workplace or family or the person who's selling you meat at the deli. That's so, so important because if you can just make it a habit of being a positive being, that trust is going to develop automatically. I mean, you know as well as I that when you meet people for the first time, you can get a pretty good first impression as far as whether they're totally genuine, whether they're just trying to do something so that you like them or that kind of thing. The more that you work on yourself up front so that it becomes part of your being to be a very genuine person, the easier it is for people to trust you right up front. You can't just walk up and say, trust me, like the car salesman or anything like that.
Definitely. And, the basic building block of improving yourself is really knowing yourself. You have to know where you're starting out from in order to improve. But when you keep building upon yourself, self improvement courses, positive mindset, just building on your skills, learning things like that, the more you're trying to improve yourself, the more that rubs off on the people who are around you, and that helps to build a connection because it helps you to find common interests, find things to talk about.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Under the professional workplace tips here, you and I talk a lot about the word mindfulness. And it's
Yes.
about mindfulness is pausing and so on and so forth. But what it says here is it says this means taking responsibility for your words and actions. Those who are mindful and careful and attend to what they say, and they don't let their own negative emotions impact the people around them. So again, you're working on that, and that's kind of like the result of that. Because if you are mindful, then you are putting in that little bit of a pause before you react and you respond to people and you start saying things in the first place. So mindfulness works everywhere.
It really does. Mindfulness is about knowing yourself, knowing the situation, and being present. And that last part is so key in building relationships, because if someone is talking to you and you're thinking about what you're going to say next and what you're going to make for dinner and this event you're going to in 2 weeks, and rather than paying attention to the person in front of you, the person that's there, your relationships are going to be very shallow. You need to connect with people, and that means being there with them in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And this combination of the trust and mindfulness is a great way to generate what we were just talking about a little bit, which is your mutual respect for each other. And the other two that they talked about was open communication. And obviously, the more that you trust each other and you have respect for each other, the easier it is to communicate with people about anything. One of the biggest problems in the workplace is people being afraid to speak up about something, even though they're not that they know that they are right about something because it's just a culture there not to speak up. So it's really, really important to develop that uh, trust and mindfulness, which will open the communication with each other.
Certainly. Communication is at the core of a relationship. I mean, if you're not communicating, then you're just two people, period. The relationship is built as you share ideas, as you share opinions, as you share, period. Um, that's really what helps deepen that relationship. Once you've met the person, relationships aren't one and done. They need to be taken care of and grown like a garden. And you need to go back, and communication really is feeding that garden.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the keys, especially these days when we're so saturated with media and relationships and that kind of thing, is welcoming diversity. And what the it says here is people with good relationships not only accept diverse people and opinions, but they welcome them. So when your friends and colleagues have different opinions from yours, you take the time to sit down and listen to each other to understand each other. This is really to seek first to understand and then to be understood principle right out of Stephen Covey's book. But it's so important, and it's a great way to just knock down the barriers to everything because it is a diverse world, and yet we are all one human race, and it's so important to just recognize that and put whatever negative thoughts about everything behind you just by open communication, understanding each other, and listening to each other. And it's beautiful to do that. It's wonderful to develop relationships that way.
And that diversity of ideas by itself creates so much from the relationship. If you hang out with people who are just like you, that you all have the same opinions, the same upbringing, it doesn't bring in new ideas for you to grow. And being able to share different ideas, because you never know where a good idea is going to come from, where new information is going to come from. So, by having diverse relationships with people that have different expertises and different interests, connects you to so much more, so that the relationship becomes more than just two people. It's all of this information and all of these ideas that can come from the two people. And we've talked about innovation techniques in past episodes. And innovation comes from taking two things that don't necessarily fit together and seeing what happens. Well, relationships are just like that, because when you take two things that are not alike and they build on each other, you take things in all sorts of new directions.
Yeah, and listening is really the definition of what we talk about all the time. It's the first step in unconditional giving. And if you're listening to somebody, you can really understand that what they're looking for, and you're going to be able to help meet their needs. A couple of tips that I found in another article, as far as the giving side of things go, we often talk about networking and going to networking meetings and meeting that wallflower that's standing there, walking up and introducing ourselves to that person, finding out what they're doing, and then seeing somebody in the room that they need to meet, and just walking up and introducing the two of them. And 10 minutes later, they're talking and they're having a great time together, and you notice they've got something good developing. So making connections for other people is fantastic. Another tip is offering something to somebody before asking them for anything. That's a great way to just let people know up front just by your asking that you're a very genuine person. So, and something else in the workplace too, a good tip as a boss, and this comes through in how to win friends and influence people, is to share some of your own vulnerabilities and letting people know that you're not perfect either, with other people, because people like to know that we're kind of like sharing the journey with them.
Right. There's so much that comes out of relationships. We've been talking a lot about how to build them. But when you think about what you get out of a relationship, it's so much more than what you're putting in. And we talked about health benefits and longevity benefits. There are so many more because, again, you've got the stress relief benefits, but you've also got some tangible benefits in terms of work and work life balance, things like that. Building your relationships really does keep you in touch with what's going on. There was a recent survey done, and it turns out that almost 80% of jobs are filled before they ever get listed on job boards like Indeed and Career Builder. And they're filled because the people who are doing the hiring are looking to the folks they have relationships with to see if they know people who they think would be good for the job. Because what they're thinking is, I have great relationships with these people. If they have great relationships with people, then that's got to be somebody that I can trust. And extending those relationships out, bring people into the workplace, bring people into businesses, bring people into clubs and hobbies.
Absolutely. I mean, when we talk about networking, most of us are first exposed to that as far as business development techniques and strategies. However, networking, relationship building is the reason why 80% or more of these positions are filled before they even hit any of those sites. Because the bottom line is, you would rather talk to somebody that you know and trust and meet somebody and get them in the door that way than you would as far as just doing research. So it's so important on the hiring side of things. It's important when you are looking for a job to tap into the relationships that you have with people. Let them know what you're looking to do. Do your homework first, but identify the people who you want to let know that you're in the hunt, and have them help you network your way into different situations where you might be able to get an interview. So it's, again, it's all related to relationships.
Exactly. It's all connected. And, we think about the things we want in life. The vast majority of those things come from people, whether it's an opportunity, a job, children, however you're looking at success. The key to all of it is working with people and building those relationships. So that's where you really have to start. And I've spoken to a lot of people who do networking, and the one thing they always come to later, they realize this after the fact, is that the best time to build relationships, the best time to build a network is before you need anything from it.
Absolutely. And one of the neat things about that, once you develop those relationships with people, we talk a lot about finding your own passion and your purpose. And by talking with others and talking about theirs, you're going to find yours a whole lot easier also. That's a really good side benefit of relationship building, is helping each other find their sense of purpose, because everybody wants to feel needed and so on and so forth. And if you can run an idea by somebody and say, oh yeah, you'd be great at that, it really enhances your self-esteem on that. And actually, one of the tips, one of the benefits of personal relationships that I found here is feel richer. And it says a survey by the National Bureau of Economic Research of 5,000 people found that doubling your group of friends has the same effect on your well-being as well as a 50% increase in income. And it makes sense.
It really does, because, the more people you have relationships with, the more you're exposed to, and the more you do. So part of it is just having people to go out and do things with, to get out of your own little bubble. And that always makes people feel better about themselves, because people tend to look at themselves through other people's eyes. And when they're isolated, they're thinking, oh, well, nobody's around me because nobody likes me. And they tend to get down on themselves. When the more people they have that they connect with, the more comfortable they feel with people and the more comfortable they feel with themselves, because they see others are comfortable with them. So it really is this cycle that feeds upon itself, that the more people you have around you, the better you feel about yourself. The better you feel about yourself, the better other people feel about themselves being connected to you, which makes you feel better, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, basically, we talk about positive bank accounts and just helping each other out and building each other up and that kind of thing, supporting each other. It's so, so important. And that's why, one of the greatest tools that we've talked about often is keeping a gratitude journal every day or, every morning or every night. Just once a day, write down all the things that you're grateful for. And you're going to actually list a few people that you've had positive interactions with during the day to do so. So it's really, really, it's a wonderful thing to help each other out.
It really is. And again, relationships have to be nurtured in order to grow. So you really do need to take the effort to reach out to people that you haven't spoken to in a while. Keep those connections, alive. And it can be as simple as, a quick email. Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. How are you doing?
Yeah, and when
But
it comes to the workplace and business, it's really important to have a system where you do that with your clients, even with your vendors and other, strategic partners that you're trading referrals with. It's important to be able to do that from time to time, and it is as easy as dropping an email because even if it's not answered, at least people know that you're thinking about them.
right. And if you're like me and you tend to let things, fall by the wayside in terms of being in touch, there are literally dozens of apps that can connect to your contact list and just periodically remind you, hey, you haven't spoken to this person in a while, which is a great way to, remind yourself to keep in touch.
Yeah, with me, I'm still using my Excel spreadsheet and sorting by dates. But yes, there's so much stuff out there to help you out.
However it works for you is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Because if you're using an app, you're using pen and paper, you're using a spreadsheet, it has to be something that you're comfortable using. So, however you can do it best for you is what's best.
And the bottom line is when you do, you're feeling good about doing it for others too. It's
Exactly.
great.
All right, we're coming up on the end of our time. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for our listeners this week?
Well, being the happiness and success GPS and talking about positive relationships, building a foundation, the four tips that I always teach people as far as the foundation for a positive life and therefore positive relationships is number one, the positive mindset, which is your choice. Number two is being an unconditional giver. Number three is realizing that you're in charge of your life. And then number four is finding your purpose and passion. If you have that going for you and you can share that with others and help other people out, you're going to have some wonderful relationships.
Fantastic. For me, I think the big takeaway is to make the effort and grow those relationships. The benefits you get are so incredible that it's worth putting in the work. So many of us go, well, I've got so much to do. I've got to get all this done. And people sort of fall by the wayside. You go, well, they'll understand, where a task doesn't understand, it just has to be finished. But it's well worth your time to make sure you're paying attention to those relationships and growing them. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch us every week at the xvadio.com/podcasts. You can also find us at the iTunes Store, the Apple Podcasts app, iHeartRadio app, Spotify, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. See you then.